Hello, good Blender people. Okay, in this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to go ahead and make something like this, sort of this ancient ruin. It's actually made out of three main objects: the cylindrical base, the column, and the top here. So before I did this, I went online and I looked up different kinds of ancient columns from Greek and Roman cultures, things like that. Some Egyptian architecture also works out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make something like this today. And it's going to be pretty straightforward. This is set up for beginners. This is using the older version of Blender 2.79, and that's because this tutorial series is meant for my students for our video game production class, and we are using Blender's game engine, and Blender no longer supports the game engine in the latest version, so we are actually back a version or two. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started making this. All right, so I'm going to start off by just doing File New, and here we are in our empty scene. I think I'm going to start off by creating the base. So I'm going to right mouse click on the cube. I'm going to press X and I'll choose delete. You'll also notice that my keys that I'm pressing are showing up down here in the bottom left hand corner, and hopefully that helps. Okay, I'm going to press Shift A now, and I'm going to add in a mesh, and it's going to be a cylinder. I'm going to press GZ and raise that up just so it's sitting on top of the grid. I'll zoom in. So the main tools that I'm going to be using in this tutorial are going to be grab, rotate, and scale, just to transform the objects. And then I'll be using extrude. I might end up using loop cut, but that's pretty much it. So about 5 tools. All right, so now I'm going to press Tab and I'm going to enter into edit mode. If you press Tab and you don't see these pie menus here, it means that you don't have the pie menu add-on installed. It's optional, but it is nice. I did make a video called Setting Up Blender for the Game Engine, and that will help you get your Blender workspace set up just like I have mine. All right, so I'm going to choose Edit Mode, and then I'm going to press S, Z, and scale it down. So it looks like it's about right. And again, I'm just eyeballing it. And then I'm going to press S, and I'm just going to scale the whole thing up until it feels about right. Okay, and I'll scale that on the Z again. Something like that. Okay, good. So now I want to go ahead and start shaping this a little bit. Now on mine, I'm going to press 1 to be in vertex mode. I'm going to press 2 to switch into edge mode, and then I'll press 3, and that will get me face mode. If you don't have that set up, you can come down here in the bottom of your 3D window, and you have these 3 buttons here for vertex, edge, and face mode. Okay, so I'm going to select face mode, right mouse click, select that bottom face, and I'll just press S and scale it out a little bit, and that gives us that kind of look. And again, a lot of this stuff is optional, but it teaches you a little bit more about modeling. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and make those other tiers. So I'm going to press E to extrude, then I'm going to right mouse click, and that prevents the extrusion from moving. I'll then press S to scale, and I'll go ahead and scale it in. E to extrude, and I'll go ahead and go up. Now you can decide if you want to scale it again. You'll see that it'll come in at an angle, so if you like that look, great. If not, just leave it like that. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Again, I'll do one more tier. So E to extrude, right mouse click, S to scale in, bring it in a little bit, E to extrude one last time, and then I think we'll scale it one last time just to keep it consistent. Okay, I'll tab and get back out of object mode, or sorry, get out of edit mode and get back into object mode. Okay, so you can see if I look here, it's flying like a UFO, and I like to ground my objects a little bit. So if you're on a regular computer that has a number pad, you can press numpad 1 or numpad 3. I'm on my laptop, so I'm going to click down here on the view menu, and I'm going to go ahead and choose left view, and then I'll just grab this and bring it down so it's actually sitting on my grid. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save my project. So File, Save. Click over here on the left-hand side, choose Desktop, and I'll go ahead and call this Ruin Demo. Press Return once, press Return a second time, and there you go. You can see the name up there on the top. All right, so now probably the most complex part, and this is going to be the column. So the way we're going to do is we're going to model one column, and then we'll go ahead and then duplicate it a couple more times. All right, so I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll move the base off to the side, Shift A, add in a new cube, and what that will allow us to do is we'll just move it off to the side, and then we'll scale the cube up or down to fit the base. Okay, so I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to start off by scaling it down. It's clearly too big. Okay, so I'm going to scale it on the Z-axis, give it sort of a big chunky base. Again, maybe I'll select that bottom face, scale that out, something like that. Maybe extrude it a little bit just to give it a little bit more architectural interest. So obviously you don't need to follow me exactly. Again, I'm going to be using the Extrude tool mostly. I might decide to use the Loop Cut tool as the two go hand in hand. Okay, so I'm going to select this top face here, and I'm going to E to extrude, right mouse click, S to scale in, and that allows me to do this right here. Now there is a tool called Inset which works quite nicely. However, the Inset tool does not allow us to do what's called an outset, and I'll try to demonstrate that in a little bit. Okay, so now I can go ahead and I can extrude, and I can go ahead and come up, and I'm going to go ahead and stop right about there, and I'm going to make a little detail here. So here's the Inset tool. If I press I can just do the Inset tool right there. So the Inset tool is like a combination of extrude and scale at the same time, and that's really nice. It does really save on time. And then I can go ahead and I can extrude again. I'm going to undo this. And the reason why I'm not going to use the Inset tool in this model is because if I want to do the opposite of an inset, which is called an outset, it doesn't work. So if I press Inset and I want to go out, I'm trying to pull my mouse to the right, it won't work. So I'm going to press Escape. Make sure you haven't actually done any of the extrusions on this top face. Here's how you can tell. I'm in face mode, and if I press E and you did an extrusion, notice that you can see these little dots going all around the edges here. Those are 4 faces there. You don't want that. Okay, so you can just press Control Z until you get rid of those dots. So the technique I like to use is I like to do E for extrude, then right mouse click, now S for scale, and see now you can actually go out. So I know it's flickering, which doesn't look very good, but that'll be fixed in just a moment. So now that I'm going outwards, I can left mouse click, then I can extrude again, and now I can go up a little ways, and now it works. Okay, so that now works. Now I want to go back in, so the Inset tool could work. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with one tool, just again to keep this a beginner tutorial. So E, right mouse click, S, bring it on in. And this time I think I'll go ahead and I'll just extrude up a fair distance. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to use the Loop Cut tool just to show you how to use that tool. So I'm going to press A to deselect all. I'm going to press Control R, and you move your mouse around the object until you see this pink cut line. and I'm going to go ahead and do a horizontal cut. So that's this one right here. So I'm going to left mouse click to place the cut, and then I'm going to move my mouse, in this case, up and down to decide where I want the cut. And I'm going to place it about a little more than middle, something like that. And then left click once more to place it. Okay, so now I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard, get back into edge mode, or sorry, face mode. I'm going to select this top face, and now I can actually scale this in. And because I placed that loop cut right there, it allows me to scale this top part down, and you notice this bottom part here doesn't get affected because it's separated by this cut here. And so that way I can get that nice little taper effect there. Again, it's all personal preference, but I think it does make it look a little more interesting. Okay, so to finish this off, I'm going to go ahead and do a sort of a top cap here. So again, I'm going to press E to extrude, right mouse click, S to scale, and I'm just going to go ahead and go through here a little bit faster now. Hopefully you get the idea. And I'll just kind of vary things a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put on, I'm going to do some insets, some architectural insets here, and this adds a nice little touch. So I'll do that on maybe 2 faces here, and then I'll speed up the video so you can see the end result here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a face here, and I'm going to use the Inset tool because I'm going to be going a little faster here. So this time I'm going to use the Inset tool. So I'll just press I and drag my mouse in, and then I'll go ahead and I'll press E to extrude, and then I'll go ahead and go inward a little bit. And it just makes that face a little bit more interesting to look at. I'll show it to you again. I'll select a bottom face, I to inset, drag it in, and then E, and you can extrude and make it come outward, although that wouldn't be typical. And then I'm going to go ahead and extrude it inward there. And you can just do it something like that. You can see that looks a little bit more interesting from the corner. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll come back after I'm finished. Okay, so I'm just finishing up on the last side here, and again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So I to inset, bring it in so it looks roughly like the other side, then E to extrude, and I'll bring it in a little bit. Again, you can eyeball it. Again, inset, extrude, and there we go. So obviously you could go ahead and do the same technique to these upper portions here. I'm not going to do that for this tutorial, but you can go ahead and do it, and you can see that that looks certainly a little bit nicer there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call that finished. I'm going to go ahead and grab and bring in the base. I'll then grab and move this over. Okay, so you can clearly see that they're not the exact same size, or they're not the right size to be proportionate. I need to go ahead and scale up one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and scale up or scale down the column. So I'll select my column, just tab into edit mode, press A a couple times to select all, and I'll go ahead and scale it just to scale it down. Maybe scale it on the Z-axis a little bit to make it a little taller. Again, just kind of whatever you want. You will find that if you scale something, like I just scaled this on the Z-axis to make it a little taller, it sometimes lifts up in the air. So you can see if I scale it on the Z-axis, you can see now it's actually floating. So just be careful about that. And there we go. Okay, and finally I think I'll go ahead and select my base here, and I'm going to go ahead and scale that on the X and the Y axis. So I'll do S and then X and scale it on the X axis, and then S, Y and scale it on the Y axis. There you go. If you're wondering, can you scale it on two axes at once? So for instance, if I wanted to scale this on both the X and the Y, but not the Z, can you do it that way? So that way you're doing it at the same time? Yes, you can. You can basically press S for scale, and then you can press Shift Z, and what that means is it means scale on the other two axes, but not Z. And so now you can see that I'm scaling on both the X and the Y, but not Z, which is much more accurate, and it's quicker, just because you don't have to do two actions, you can just do one. Okay, so that is looking pretty good, and I think that's about where I want it to go. So this is where you'd want to go ahead and switch to your views. So again, I'm on a laptop here, so I'm going to be doing it down here with my menu. But if you have a number pad on your keyboard, you can press numpad 2. I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to choose Top View. So in Top View here, I can just grab and move that around, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate. So I've got my column selected. I'm going to press Shift D, and there I am. I can freely move it around. But now I want to press Y, and I'm going to drag it in the Y axis. So you might not be moving it in the Y axis. You might have to press X, and you can drag it on the X axis also. It's going to be in one of those two, X or Y. All right, so I'll just drag it this way. Now I'm going to press Shift right mouse click, and I'm going to select both columns, and I'm going to duplicate both of them. Shift D, and now I've got both of them duplicated. I'll now press Y, lock the movement to my Y axis, and there we go. We've got 4. Okay, looking pretty good. I'll go ahead and save. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and make the top cap there. Now I could just duplicate my base there and bring it up, and then I'd have something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and make it based off of a cube to stick with the original model. Okay, so I'm going to left mouse click, let's see, and you Shift A, add in a cube. All right, awesome. I'll go ahead and tab into edit mode, scale it down on the Z axis just to flatten it out a little bit. Good. Then I'll scale it out. I'm going to jump into top view so I can see what's going on. Again, I'll grab it, place it, scale it from the top view so it looks all right. Grab it. Now this is where wireframe view can come in handy. So if I press the letter Z and choose wireframe, I can now see through all my objects, and it just makes more sense. Okay, so again, kind of scale it, make sure it looks good from the top view. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and change my view to either the left view or the top view. And you can see from the left view, I don't like the placement of it. So I'm going to press GZ and grab it, bring it up to the top. I'm going to scale it on the Z axis, so SZ, make it a little thinner, and just grab it. And working from the side view, it just makes everything so much easier. So now you have to decide, do I want it just sitting right on those little caps there? Maybe I don't need to show those. So you can kind of decide. I'll go ahead and leave it like that. And one more, kind of flattening it out. Okay, so I'm just going to have it sit right on top. Okay, so once you're done with that, then you can go back to perspective view. I'm going to press Z again, and I'm going to go back into solid view. All right, I'm going to press 3 on my top of my keyboard, make sure I'm in face mode here, and I'm going to continue extruding and scaling. So I'm going to press E to extrude, right mouse click, then S to scale in, and that'll allow me to go in like that. E to extrude, go up a little bit, E to extrude, right mouse click, S to scale, bring it in a little bit, E to extrude. You should get the idea. And that's going to make sort of the classic stepped model here. And I think I'll finish off with one more extrusion. And this time on the top cap, I'll then give it a little scaling, so that way it goes up. And I'll tab back into object mode. Okay, so I'm going to call that pretty much finished. I'll then maybe go ahead and just do one more Shift A, add in a plane, scale it up, grab it, place it under my ruin here, and then there we go. Okay, so at this point you'd want to look and see and make sure that all of your elements look proportional. You want to make sure that this top cap, for instance, does not look, for instance, if it looked, oh, let me show you something that's happening to my model here. And this will happen to a lot of beginners. Notice that when I scale this, if I actually let me go ahead and scale this. If I scale it, notice what's happening. It's scaling, which is nice, but notice that the origin, that little orange point, is actually a couple inches below the actual object. And so the scaling feels like it's a little bit off. If I rotate my object, notice that it's rotating around that orange point there. And so it almost feels like in basketball where you don't want to double dribble and you have to stop dribbling and you have to pivot with your foot, and you're kind of rotating around that point there. And so the reason why that happened was because when I was in edit mode and I selected my whole object, I pressed G and I grabbed the object and I moved it up or down. So I moved it away from the origin point. So how do we fix that? How do we get this origin point with my arrows here and the dot? How do we get that back here in the center of the object, which is what I'm used to? So the way you do that is you come over here on the left-hand side toolbar of Blender, and you'll see this pop-up menu that says Set Origin. And if you click on that, you want to choose this second option here called Origin to Geometry. And you'll see now it pops back up to the middle of the geometry. And now when I press S and scale, it behaves just like I wanted it to. So to finish up here, if your object is really, let's say it's something ginormously big like this, this wouldn't make any sense at all. They wouldn't be built like that. This would crush it. It just doesn't look realistic. I'm going to undo that. So at this point in your model, make sure that everything looks proportionate, realistic enough as if this could be built and used by creatures in your video game or in your model or your movie. Okay, I hope this helped you out as a modeler, and good luck, and send me some comments and questions if you got them. Thanks a lot.